I want you to just imagine for a second a universe where chaos literally does not exist.
Right.
Like a reality where every single perceived flaw, every catastrophic breakdown, or every time you think you're seeing decay or destruction, it's actually a flawless mathematical adjustment.
Yeah, which is, I mean, it requires this almost violent reframing of how we experience our own reality, right? Because
Yeah.
we were so deeply conditioned to just view entropy as this ultimate destructive force, like the slow, inevitable heat death of literally everything.
Yeah, the universe just slowly winding down into dust.
Exactly. But in the framework we're going to examine today, that decay isn't a elective order at all. It is, well, it's described as this necessary, perfectly calculated balancing act that happens across an infinite structure.
Right. And even begin to wrap our heads around how that could possibly be true, we really have to start by asking this genuinely wild question. What if the most mysterious, brilliant mathematical equations ever written, specifically those left behind by the legendary mathematician Srinivasa Ramanujan, what if they were completely accurate but built for the entirely wrong universe?
Yeah, and that right there is the central thesis of the incredibly dense, just highly complex document we're unpacking for this deep dive.
Oh, it is a stack of paper, let me tell you.
It really is.
Yeah.
The text is by George James Ducas, and it outlines this monumental framework called Transdimensional Unified Field Theory, which we'll just refer to as TDUFT to keep things simple.
Okay, let's unpack this, because our mission today for you listening is to basically understand how this theory attempts to completely recode our understanding of reality.
Because it's a massive undertaking.
It is. We have this huge stack of theoretical physics and advanced mathematics in front of us. And the absolute core of it is a ground-up rewrite of Ramanujan's foundational equations. Like, TDUFT takes these mathematical masterworks and reconfigures them to explain velocity, time, and light in what it calls the phi universe.
The phi, as in the golden ratio.
Right, the phi universe. And I promise you, this is an absolute mind-bender of a topic. We're going to look at the idea that the fundamental software of reality actually has to be physically translated just to work.
Yeah, so to just sort of set the parameters of our exploration today, we are going to impartially examine TDUFT's core premise. And that argument is essentially that primordial mathematics, so pure abstract math that governs theoretical potential, it cannot survive contact with physical reality without being structurally corrected.
Like it needs a patch.
Exactly, a patch. We'll be looking at how this theory attempts to translate Ramanujan's work out of this domain of pure, untouched mathematical potential and basically force it into the messy physical universe that we actually live in.
I do want to ground this in a bit of history first, though, because the context of Ramanujan makes it so much more fascinating, I think.
Oh, absolutely. His story is incredible.
Right. For anyone who might not be deep into mathematical history, Srinivasa Ramanujan was this self-taught genius from India back in the early 20th century. He had almost zero formal training, but he just intuitively produced these unbelievably complex, beautiful equations that completely baffled the top mathematicians at Cambridge University.
Yeah, he would just mail them these finished formulas with absolutely no proofs.
No proofs at all. And when people asked him how he came up with them, he famously claimed that this unmanifested Hindu goddess, Namagiri, would literally write the equations on his tongue while he slept.
Which is just, I mean, it's wild. And the thing is, his notebooks are still being decoded by mathematicians today, literally a century later.
Yeah.
They're used in understanding everything from polymer chemistry to the thermodynamics of black holes.
Yeah.
His equations just possess this kind of otherworldly symmetry and insight that completely defies traditional academic derivation.
And that, right there, that otherworldly symmetry is the perfect jumping off point for us. Because according to TDUFT, that exact symmetry is the actual problem.
Right.
The theory proposes that everything fundamentally divides into two distinct domains. First, you have the pi realm, like the 3.14 circle math we all learned in school.
Love pi realm. Yes.
And then, totally separate from that, you have the phi realm, which is based on the golden ratio, that famous irrational number, roughly equal to 1.618.
Yeah, and this unyielding separation between these two realms is literally the bedrock of Ducas's entire argument here. TDUFT describes the pi realm as this primordial wave domain.
Primordial wave domain.
Yeah,
Right.
so if we strip away the jargon, you can basically think of it as the pre-creation source
I
code.
like that.
It is governed by this concept called pi closure and modular decay.
Oh.
So it represents pure, unbroken symmetry. It's infinite potential. It is literally the math that exists before mathematics coalesces into physical structure.
The math before the math becomes a thing you can actually touch.
Exactly.
I was trying to picture what that actually means practically, and it feels like looking at an architect's pure abstract blueprint.
That's a good way to look at it.
Right, because on that blueprint paper, a line drawn in pencil has absolutely no thickness. A perfect circle has infinite decimal places. The geometry is conceptually perfect, but it carries literally zero physical weight.
Right. You can't live in a blueprint.
Exactly. But the phi realm, on the other hand, is the physical bricks and mortar of the actual built house.
And that transition, the jump from the blueprint to the physical house, is exactly where classical mathematics fails, according to this theory.
Because it's a completely different environment.
Right. You cannot use a blueprint line drawn in graphite to physically hold up a heavy oak roof. The mathematics of the blueprint have to be translated into structural geometry. The abstract curve has to become like a physical steel beam that is actually subject to gravity and tension.
Which means the pi realm is this unmanifested potential, and the phi realm, our universe, is the created physical reality. And TDUFT is saying this physical realm isn't governed by the perfect circles of pi. It's governed by phi closure, geometric recursion, and dimensional emergence.
And mixing these two domains without translating them is mathematically catastrophic in the TDUFT framework.
Catastrophic how?
Well, you have pi, representing primordial symmetry, and you have phi, representing actualized physical geometry, literally the manifestation of space and form. And the theory is extremely specific about their relationship. It notes that when pi is squared, it becomes harmonic with phi.
Okay.
So this harmonic relationship allows phi to exist inside the squared pi domain. However, and this is crucial, phi cannot rule there. The primordial realm is completely dominated by the symmetry of pi.
But the moment we cross over the boundary into our universe, those rules flip, right?
Completely. Once you are within the created universe, phi has absolute dominance. This is a phi universe. So any mathematical operator, any equation at all that attempts to mix primordial pi with physical phi, it has to be fundamentally rewritten to remain valid.
Because it's speaking the wrong language.
Basically, yeah. You can't bring the pure imaginary geometry of the blueprint onto the construction site and expect it to somehow govern the physics of the building.
Okay, I have to stop and push back on this pretty hard.
Sure.
Because, I mean, this sounds conceptually elegant and everything, but we use pi in physical equations every single day in the real world.
We do.
We use it to calculate the orbits of satellites. Engineers use it to determine the structural integrity of cylinders. We use it in electromagnetism. So how on earth does this theory justify kicking pi out of the active physical universe when, like, my phone's GPS literally relies on equations that use pi to figure out where I am?
Yeah, and if pi were merely an abstract concept, your pushback would be entirely valid. But TDUFT actually redefines pi's role. It doesn't claim that pi vanishes or becomes useless.
Okay, so where does it go?
It argues that the architecture of reality externalizes pi to the pre-creation boundary.
Externalizes it.
Right. So in this theory, pi is removed from the active internal velocity equations of the physical space, what it calls the lattice, and it's placed at the extreme edge. It becomes the ultimate boundary condition. It acts as the container of potential rather than the active internal operator that's driving physical motion dimension by dimension.
Okay, so to use a sort of arena metaphor, pi is the concrete walls of the stadium, but phi is the physics of the actual football game being played inside it.
That's a great analogy.
The game wouldn't exist without the stadium holding it, but the rules of the stadium walls don't dictate how the ball moves through the air.
Exactly. The boundary holds the potential, but the internal geometry dictates the actualized events. And this strict, unyielding separation is what creates the massive problem with Ramanujan's equations.
Oh, because of where they came from.
Yes. Because according to TDUFT, Ramanujan's incredible mathematical insights were entirely locked inside the blueprint phase.
They were pure pi.
Yes. The source material specifically focuses on Ramanujan's original modular velocity expression and also his continued fractions, which are often referred to in mathematics as the Rogers-Ramanujan identities.
Right.
TDUFT absolutely acknowledges the profound brilliance of these equations, but it argues that they belong exclusively to the pi realm.
Because they carry pi through the equations using this thing called a modular parameter, right?
Yes, exactly.
And the math, I think it's represented by the letter Q.
Yeah.
So these equations are structurally perfectly compatible with the pure symmetry of pi, but they are highly, highly incompatible with the messy, recursive, physical phi universe.
Yeah, and to really understand that incompatibility, we need to look at the structural foundation of Ramanujan's formula itself. His equation mixes pi-base unity specifically, the classical number 1 sitting right in the denominator of his fractions. He mixes that with phi-base recursion.
Okay, wait.
In classical mathematics, the number 1 is simply unity. It is the integer 1. But in the TDUFT framework, pi unity, this abstract concept of the integer 1, is geometrically invalid in a physical universe.
Okay, I really struggle with this part when reviewing the material. How can the number 1 be geometrically invalid? 1 is 1. I mean, I have 1 coffee cup on this table right now. It feels pretty valid and physical to me.
I know, it's weird to think about, but it requires looking at how unity is actually constructed in this theory. The physical universe, the phi realm, operates on a principle that TDUFT calls the Vieta closure identity.
Vieta closure identity.
Right. And this dictates that physical unity must be constructed from the geometry of the golden ratio itself.
So not just a flat integer.
Exactly. If you take phi to the power of -1 and add it to phi to the power of -2, the result is exactly 1.00000000000.
Wow. So 1 over phi plus 1 over phi squared equals exactly 1.
Mathematically, yes. So in a universe governed by phi, unity cannot just be an abstract, monolithic integer handed down from some conceptual blueprint. It has to be a composite geometric structure derived from the golden ratio itself.
Ah, I see.
Because Ramanujan's equations rely on the classical abstract denominator of 1, they lack this underlying geometric structure. Therefore, that classical 1 must be completely removed and replaced for the math to actually map onto physical reality.
This circles back so perfectly to Ramanujan's claim of divine revelation. He literally said he downloaded this perfect software from a goddess while he slept.
Yeah.
But if we follow TDUFT's logic here, he brought down pure, divine, primordial pi software. And then regular mathematicians spent a century trying to run it on our physical geometric phi hardware.
And you get a system glitch.
Exactly, a massive glitch. The math produces infinities, or these weird abstract results that don't perfectly describe physical motion.
Right.
So TDUFT is essentially stepping in to write the patch for that universal glitch.
What's fascinating here is how the text handles this patch. It does it very carefully. It doesn't just discard Ramanujan's underlying genius. It preserves the core recursive structure of his continued fractions.
So the skeleton stays the same.
Yes, but it substitutes the mathematical abstracts, like that primordial number 1 with geometric realities. It takes an equation of pure potential and forces it to carry the physical geometric weight of the universe.
So how exactly does Ducas patch the glitch? Like, if we strip out the abstract one, what do we actually put in its place?
Well, this leads us straight into the absolute centerpiece of the whole theory.
The big rewrite.
The big rewrite, yes. It's specifically called the Ducas-Ramanujan phi-velocity operator.
Okay, the Ducas-Ramanujan phi-velocity operator. So what does it do?
This operator is a complete structural overhaul. The translation does a couple of really critical things to shift the math from the abstract over to the physical. First, it takes the mathematical concept of phi, and it transforms it into actual physical velocity.
Wait, really?
Yeah. In the new equation, phi becomes the variable v.
See, this is a huge conceptual leap for me because we are so used to thinking of phi, the golden ratio, as just this static proportion, you know?
Right. In art and nature.
Exactly. You see it in the spiral of a nautilus shell, or like the arrangement of seeds in a sunflower, or the proportions of the Parthenon in Greece. But here, Ducas is saying phi is no longer a static, pretty ratio. It is the literal, active speed of spatial expansion.
It becomes completely dynamic. It's a rate of motion.
That's wild.
And next, the rewrite addresses that problematic abstract one we were talking about in the denominator. Ducas strips it out entirely.
Okay.
And in its place, the theory inserts a geometric attenuation term. So instead of a static number, the denominator becomes a mechanism that actually scales.
Okay, I know that reading algebraic equations on audio is just a recipe for losing the audience instantly. So we definitely won't read the whole string of symbols out loud.
Probably a good call.
But I do want to paint a conceptual picture of what this new formula actually does. Because the result is this pure phi geometry, completely pi-free velocity operator. It calculates velocity by taking the golden ratio and multiplying it by this massive infinite sum.
Right.
And tucked inside that infinite sum, right in the exact spot where Ramanujan had a simple number 1, Ducas places this new geometric attenuation term.
And we can focus entirely on the mechanism of that term rather than the raw algebra. The document actually provides a really rigorous mathematical proof. It's a fixed point test to demonstrate that this rewrite isn't simply a theoretical exercise. It proves it actually functions mathematically.
Let's walk through that test, because if you were going to claim to rewrite one of the most famous equations in all of human history, you really have to prove the car actually drives once you rebuild the engine, right?
Exactly. So in mathematics, whenever you introduce an infinite sum into an equation, the primary danger is always divergence.
Divergence meaning what, exactly?
Yeah. Meaning you risk the numbers growing continuously until they just blow up to infinity, which obviously renders the equation totally useless for describing finite physical reality.
Right, because our universe isn't infinitely fast.
Exactly. So TDUFT sets up this test starting with an initial baseline guess for velocity. It starts by setting the initial velocity to the value of phi itself, which is approximately 1.618.
Okay, so we take 1.618 and we drop it into this massive, infinite, recursive mathematical machine.
And we run the calculation dimension by dimension. We calculate for the first dimension, then we do the second, then the third, and so on. Because the new attenuation term involves raising the velocity to higher and higher powers as the dimensions increase, the denominator in the fraction grows incredibly fast.
And just basic math, when a denominator gets massive, the overall value of the fraction gets tiny.
Exactly. So the value contributed by the first dimension is significant. The numbers become microscopically small.
They just drop off a cliff.
Yeah, the higher terms decay with extreme rapidity.
Which means the infinite sum doesn't blow up. It
Yes.
doesn't spiral out of control into infinity.
Right. The operator converges with absolute stability. After all the iterations, that initial velocity guess of 1.618 stabilizes at a new exact value of approximately 2.005.
2.005.
Yes. The equation is mathematically finite, it is stable, and it does not diverge. Therefore, within the framework of TDUFT, it proves it is a physically consistent description of reality.
Wow.
It proves mathematically that velocity can actually emerge from infinite dimensional recursion and find a perfectly stable fixed point.
Here's where it gets really interesting for me. Visually, I was trying to visualize this infinite sum, and the best image I could come up with is a set of cosmic breaks.
Breaks, okay?
Yeah, because if you just had pure math, pure abstract expansion without any physical constraint at all, the numbers would just spin out to infinity. The universe would just instantly explode into this formless infinite scale. But by removing the abstract one and inserting this geometric attenuation term, Ducas adds physical resistance to the math.
Ah, I see what you mean.
The math gently slows down. The cosmic breaks engage, and the expansion of the universe parks itself exactly at this velocity of 2.005.
That's a really good way to think about it. And if we push that brakes concept further, what happens when the mathematical engine is revving? The attenuation term doesn't just slow it down, it provides the structural traction that is necessary for the velocity to hold a shift.
To hold a shape.
Yes. It is the exact mechanism by which the infinite recursion of the golden ratio lattice doesn't simply remain a mathematical curiosity, but actually crystallizes into a measurable physical property.
But think about what it actually implies for the listener, right?
Yeah.
What does it mean for the universe to have a natural fixed point for velocity? Because we are so conditioned to think of speed as entirely arbitrary and relative.
Right, like driving a car.
Yeah, you press the gas pedal on a car, you go 60. You press harder, you go 80. Velocity is just a measure of distance over time. It's whatever you make it. But this theory is suggesting that the fundamental baseline of velocity in the universe isn't arbitrary at all. It is hard-coded into the geometry. The very shape of the multidimensional space demands that fundamental motion stabilizes exactly at this specific number.
It really implies a profound shift in how we view the basic laws of physics. They are no longer these arbitrary rules imposed from the outside, nor are they just observational habits of matter.
They aren't just things we happen to measure.
No. The laws of physics are the inevitable, unavoidable consequences of the geometry of the space itself. Velocity is simply the shape of the four lattice unfolding in real time.
Okay, but we have glossed over a massive, massive piece of this puzzle. When we talked about the cosmic breaks, that attenuation term, tucked inside that term is a tiny little Greek letter, epsilon.
Yes, epsilon.
And we need to spend some serious time on this, because defining what epsilon actually is brings us to arguably the most controversial, mind-bending claim of the entire theory.
It absolutely does.
It's the redefinition of entropy and what the theory calls the absolute myth of chaos.
Right. Epsilon is identified in the text as the emergence constant. In the TDUFT rewrite of Ramanujan's framework, epsilon is not a mathematical rounding error, and it's not just put there for convenience. It is a fundamental universal constant.
And it has an exact number, right?
It does. The document defines its exact numerical value through a very specific derivation. It takes the integer 3.000000000 and it subtracts 2.9979245.8, which, if you recognize that number, is the universally accepted speed of light.
So 3 minus the speed of light, but why the number 3? Where does that come from?
In the theory, 3 represents the stable, three-dimensional physical volume that we actually inhabit. The difference between that perfect geometric volume and the physical limit of light generates a deficit. And that calculation gives epsilon an exact dimensionless value of 0.000007542.
0.00207542. It is literally the numerical cost of reality.
Yes. TDUFT refers to it as the entropy residue, or sometimes the entropy cost of dimensional emergence. When Ducas rewrites the velocity operator, the natural exponential base, which in classical math represents continuous, flawless, unbroken growth, it's reinterpreted entirely.
It changes jobs.
It becomes an entropy carrier. The formula modifies the natural base to include epsilon, introducing a slight but absolutely necessary mathematical dissipation into the system.
Wait. If epsilon is the entropy residue, then TDUFT is saying that entropy isn't just things falling apart. Because in classical thermodynamics, entropy is basically the villain of the universe story.
Oh, absolutely.
Entropy is the reason a hot cup of coffee always gets cold if you leave it on the counter. It's the reason iron rusts, mountains erode, and living things age. It is the slow, unavoidable heat death of the universe where everything eventually degrades into this uniform cosmic dust.
And this is exactly where TDUFT aggressively subverts traditional physics. In this theoretical framework, chaos, defect, and destruction are absolute illusions.
Illusions.
Yes. Entropy is not decay. It is not a measure of disorder. TDUFT explicitly defines entropy as perfect harmonic attenuation.
Perfect harmonic attenuation.
Yes, it is the precise, calculated mathematical residual that is produced when infinite, pure primordial symmetry is forced to condense into finite physical geometry.
So without epsilon, without this tiny microscopic constant of entropy, the universe just remained a purely mathematical blueprint. It's perfectly symmetrical, but it doesn't actually exist. With epsilon, it manifests. It becomes physical.
Precisely.
Let me try another analogy, because I want to make sure I'm really grasping this. Imagine you have a perfectly smooth, completely frictionless tire, and it's made of pure abstract mathematics. And you are trying to drive it on a perfectly smooth, frictionless lake of infinite ice.
Okay, pure symmetry.
Right, pure symmetry. You can press the gas pedal all you want, the tire will spin infinitely perfectly forever. But the car is going to go absolutely nowhere. It has literally zero physical traction. To actually drive, to manifest physical forward motion math, you need the tiny, messy, gritty friction between the rubber and an asphalt road. In this theory, that grit, that friction, is epsilon. It is the entropy that allows the theoretical math to actually grip reality and move.
Your friction analogy actually touches on the core necessity of the residual perfectly. But it's important to understand why the theory goes so far as to reject the idea of disorder entirely. The source material is completely unequivocal about this.
What does it say exactly?
It states, and I quote, "Chaos is a myth. What appears as disorder is simply harmonic adjustment," end quote. So everything that we observe and categorize as breaking down, failing, or decaying is actually a perfectly orchestrated, mathematically precise scaling adjustment within an infinite fractal lattice. The entropy is just the cost of lifting energy from one dimensional state to the next.
Okay, I have to stop you again. I have to push back, because this is where the math hits a massive wall for me conceptually.
Go for it.
Because the math is beautiful, sure. Chaos is a myth, sounds wonderful if you're standing at a chalkboard. But I am sitting here in the messy physical world. If chaos does not exist, how does TDUFT explain a supernova exploding and violently ripping solar systems apart? Or, on a much smaller scale, how does it explain a glass shattering on my kitchen floor? Or a disease ravaging a physical body?
Right.
We experience catastrophic decay and disorder every single day. How on earth is a shattered glass or a dying star just a perfect harmonic adjustment? I need a concrete explanation for how this theory accounts for actual physical destruction.
It's a very fair question. To understand the theory's position on this, you have to fundamentally shift your vantage point. You have to step outside of our highly localized, three-dimensional, frankly, deeply human perspective.
Okay, zoom out.
Way out. When you drop a glass on the floor and it shatters, from your perspective, it is a catastrophic loss of order. You desired the glass to hold water. Now it exists as dangerous shards on the floor. You label that event a defect, a chaotic breakdown of structure.
Because it is.
To you, yes. But from the perspective of the multidimensional Philatus, absolutely nothing was lost and no true disorder occurred.
But the glass is broken, the structure is gone.
The local structure is gone, yes. But the energy and the geometric information of that glass did not just vanish into some chaotic void. They were perfectly mathematically distributed across the environment according to exact unyielding geometric laws.
Oh, I see.
The acoustic energy of the sound waves generated by the crash, the kinetic energy of the shards skittering across the floor, the microscopic thermal energy generated by the friction of the impact. Every single fraction of that event is completely accounted for in the recursive attenuation of the universe.
So, the universe doesn't care that I lost a drinking cup. The universe only cares that the mathematical equation of that event balances perfectly, down to the millionth decimal point.
Exactly. The lattice operates on absolute mathematical conservation. It isn't breaking, it is rebalancing. It is returning the energy to a different state of geometric equilibrium within the infinite fractal.
Wow.
And even in your larger example of a supernova, a star violently exploding is, to us, the ultimate chaotic event. Right?
Yeah, ultimate destruction.
But astrophysically, it is a perfectly ordered geometric release of pressure and energy governed entirely by the exact equations of mass, gravity, and radiation. The star is not acting chaotically. It is executing a mathematically inevitable transformation.
And epsilon is basically the receipt for that transaction. Yeah. It's a tiny mathematical fee the universe charges to allow that transformation to happen physically instead of just theoretically. Nothing is wasted.
Nothing is lost. Nothing is corrupted. What human beings experience and lament as entropy or decay is simply the necessary geometric friction, the epsilon, that allows the multidimensional structure of reality to unfold and adjust without ever contradicting its own foundational mathematics.
That is incredibly profound, honestly. It kind of takes the tragedy out of physics. It reframes destruction as just a change of mathematical address.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it changes everything about how we perceive time and progression.
Which is a perfect segue. Okay, so if we accept that this epsilon gives us the traction to have physical motion, how does that motion interact with the rest of reality? Because we have a stable velocity operating in our physical universe now, but you can't have velocity without time.
No, you cannot.
You can't calculate speed without a clock. We need to build the rest of the universe here. We need time and we need light.
Right, and TDUFT is, by definition, a unified field theory. It cannot simply solve velocity and then stop there. It must account for the entire integrated system of reality.
So how does it handle time?
Well, just as the theory took Ramanujan's modular product and rewrote it into the physical velocity operator, it takes his other major mathematical architecture, the Rogers-Ramanujan continued fraction, and it rewrites that into the geometric time operator.
I really love that phrase. A geometric time operator. It sounds so counterintuitive to me.
So.
Because culturally, we just think of time as this invisible external river that we are all just helplessly floating down. It's a ticking clock on the wall that exists completely independently of the room it's in.
But in the TDUFT framework, time is not an external independent parameter simply ticking away in the background. Time is structurally geometric.
Structurally geometric.
Yes. When Ducas reconfigures the continued fraction for the phi universe, it demonstrates time diffusing, dimension by dimension, through recursive mathematical attenuation. Time is not a clock. Time is a shape unfolding within the lattice.
So we have velocity, which acts as this force of physical expansion. And we have time, which is the force of geometric diffusion. And then we have the third pillar of this triad, right? Light.
Yes. The speed of light is treated as a completely separate boundary operator. In the text, it's referred to as C of ones.
Okay.
It also utilizes a phi carrier continued fraction, but its function is entirely distinct from velocity and time. Light operates as the absolute electromagnetic boundary of the created universe. It is the terminal edge of physical manifestation.
The edge of reality.
Exactly.
And the thing that binds all three of these pillars together, velocity, time, and light, is this equation TDUFT calls the eternum nexus, which, I mean, It sounds like a glowing artifact you'd find in a sci-fi movie, but it is the core mathematical invariant that holds this entire theory together.
It is the keystone,
I'm not
yes.
going to read the raw algebra out loud, but conceptually, the formula sets up this massive mathematical constraint. It dictates that phi, which represents velocity, and psi, which represents time, they must multiply together to equal exactly -1.
And that constraint is the absolute heart of the triadic structure. You have velocity, the expansion operator. You have time, the dimensional descent operator. And you have light, the physical boundary limit. The eternum nexus serves as the structural mathematical hinge between the primordial potential of the pi realm and the physical reality of the phi realm.
I want to dig into that specific constraint, though. The idea that velocity and time multiply to equal -1. Because in standard math, multiplying to a negative implies an inverse, or an opposition,
Oh,
right?
it does.
So what does it physically mean for time and velocity to be in a -1 relationship?
It represents a conjugate relationship, so an absolute, unyielding, perfect structural opposition.
Opposition.
Yes. In the theory's geometry, phi is the force of velocity, driving the lattice to expand outwards. Psi is the geometric force of time, causing the dimensional layers to descend and contract inwards. The nexus proves mathematically that velocity and time are inextricably bound in direct counteracting opposition.
So they're actively pulling against each other.
Precisely. And it is the profound harmonic tension between their opposing forces that generates the energy required to create and sustain a physical universe.
Wait, really?
Yes. If velocity and time did not equal -1, if, for example, they perfectly canceled each other out to zero, there would be no tension. And without tension, the physical lattice would instantly collapse back into the pure, unmanifested symmetry of the primordial blueprint.
The blueprint we talked about earlier.
Yes. The universe would uncreate itself.
Let me try to build a visual for this because the abstract math is getting heavy again. Picture a massive, unimaginably large cosmic loom used for weaving fabric.
A loom. Okay, I like where this is going.
In this analogy, velocity of the expansion operator is the thread pulling aggressively outward, constantly trying to widen the fabric. Time the descent operator is the heavy shuttle weaving rapidly downward, pulling the thread tight and anchoring it, dimension by dimension, into a physical shape.
Right.
And light is the physical edge of the fabric itself. You simply cannot weave anything past the speed of light.
That fits perfectly.
But the eternum nexus. The nexus is the unyielding iron frame of the loom itself. It exists solely to hold the fundamental opposing tension of those threads. The constraint velocity and time equaling -1 is the exact precise amount of tension the loom requires. If that tension snaps or goes to zero, the fabric instantly unravels. There is no reality.
The loom analogy really effectively captures the mechanical necessity of the opposition. Velocity and time are not passive measurements in PDUFT. They aren't just numbers on a dial. They are active, aggressive geometric operators weaving the dimensional structure of space.
That's incredible.
And the nexus guarantees that they remain locked in a state of perfectly balanced tension, which is the exact non-negotiable requirement for physical existence to occupy space.
So time has a physical geometry.
Okay.
Velocity has a physical geometry. Everything is a multidimensional unfolding shape. To truly visualize how this geometry actually stacks up, though, to see how the loom builds the fabric dimension by dimension, we have to look at one last mathematical concept from the document. And honestly, even just written on a piece of paper, this is Ramanujan's most visually stunning piece of work.
Oh, absolutely.
It is the infinite nested radical. It is literally a map for climbing the dimensional lattice.
The nested radical is just a mesmerizing mathematical expression. In the original form Ramanujan wrote, it appears visually as this endless cascading descent of square roots.
Yeah, it looks crazy on paper.
It does. It begins with a square root containing the number 1 plus 2 times another square root, which contains 1 plus 3 times another square root, and so on, cascading out into infinity.
Just looking at it on the page, it looks like a descending staircase of mathematics. The numbers increment perfectly. 1, 2, 3, 4, trapped inside deeper and deeper square roots forever.
Exactly.
But how does the TDUFT framework reinterpret this sphere case? Because as we've established today, TDUFT doesn't let abstract numbers just sit there doing nothing.
No, it certainly doesn't. In the theory's translation, the equation is once again bound to velocity. But the most crucial paradigm shift here is how the theory interprets those cascading integers, the 1, the 2, the 3, the 4.
Right, because normally those are just counting numbers.
Right. In standard classical mathematics, those are simply abstract integers dictating a sequence. In TDUFT, they are entirely reinterpreted. They're not abstract numbers. They represent successive geometric dimensions unfolding physically within the golden ratio lattice.
So it's not just a clever mathematical trick that equals a constant.
Yeah,
It is a literal blueprint for how dimensions stack on top of each other.
exactly. The leading one residing under the very first square root represents the primordial one-dimensional wave. It is the foundational seed of reality.
The absolute bottom floor.
Yes. And as you move deeper into the equation, as you calculate the 2 and then the 3 and then the 4, you are observing the mathematical activation of the nth geometric dimension. The nested square roots themselves act as the mathematical mechanism for successive dimensional lifts.
Dimensional lifts.
Yes. You are folding each new, higher dimension into the previous one, layering them recursively.
My brain is stretching to its absolute limits here, but I think I have a way to visualize this dimensional folding.
Let's hear it.
Think of a set of those wooden Russian nesting dolls. Usually, you open the biggest doll on the outside, and you find smaller and smaller dolls hidden inside.
Right.
But this mathematical staircase functions in reverse.
Huh.
You start with the absolute smallest, tightest seed, that leading one, representing the one-dimensional string or wave. Then, the math applies a square root, which acts like snapping a larger two-dimensional doll perfectly over the first one.
Okay, I follow.
Then the number 3 activates, snapping an even more complex three-dimensional doll over that. And every single layer snaps together perfectly, with absolutely no empty space or chaotic rattling, because the locking mechanism for every single doll is the precise geometry of the golden ratio. You are building a more complex, multidimensional universe from the inside out, layer by layer.
And because that locking mechanism is the golden ratio, the entire massive structure remains completely stable regardless of how many dimensions you add to the sequence. The mathematics of the nested radical ultimately converges to the stable velocity we discussed earlier.
Right, the 2.005.
Yes. It is the foundational mechanism by which sustained physical motion is capable of emerging from pure, layered geometric potential.
Which forces me to ask the ultimate question here.
Okay.
The Ramanujan equation goes to infinity. 1, 2, 3, 4, out to an infinite number of square roots. If those numbers represent dimensions snapping together, does TDUFT imply that we are living inside an infinitely dimensional universe? Because I'm just a regular human being. My brain realistically only processes 3 dimensions of space. Maybe 4 if I've had enough coffee and try really hard to visualize time as a physical axis.
It's a staggering thought, but the mathematics of the lattice strongly indicates that the underlying structure of reality is indeed infinite in its dimensionality.
Infinite dimension.
But, and this is where the absolute genius of the TDUFT attenuation framework comes into play, it is structurally contained.
Contain how?
Remember the cosmic breaks we discussed? Remember epsilon, that tiny entropy residue?
Yeah, the 0.002 constant.
Right, because the massive infinite dimensional structure unfolds through exact golden ratio scaling and is constantly subjected to perfect harmonic attenuation, the infinite sum converges. The energy required to activate higher dimensions scales down so rapidly that the structure never blows up into chaotic infinity.
So the higher the dimension, the less disruptive energy it actually contributes to the whole.
Precisely. This is how the universe can simultaneously be an infinite, multidimensional fractal, yet remain physically stable, securely bounded, and capable of manifesting a highly localized, calm, three-dimensional experience for human beings to actually inhabit. It is boundless in its depth, yet rigorously structured in its execution.
Infinite, but contained. That is a paradox that, within the logic of this theory, suddenly makes terrifying sense.
It really does elegantly balance the infinite with the finite.
Okay, let's take a deep breath and zoom out. We have covered an immense, staggering amount of ground in this deep dive.
We really have.
We started with this premise that the universe's original abstract blueprint, the pure, pristine symmetry of pi, had to be completely, almost violently rewritten into physical, recursive geometry, the phi realm, in order to actually construct a physical universe.
And we examined how George James Ducas's TDUFT framework modifies the historical genius of Srinivasa Ramanujan to accomplish that. It takes his pure modular equations and strips out the abstract concept of unity, substituting it with a dimension-by-dimension geometric attenuation term, giving us a mathematically sound velocity operator.
We learned about epsilon, that tiny exact universal constant of 0.000007542, which is quite literally the numerical cost of reality. It is the necessary friction that allows pure theoretical mathematics to grip the road and manifest actual physical motion. And perhaps most paradigm-shifting of all, we explored the assertion that chaos is a complete human-invented myth. that every shattered glass, every dying star, every instance of catastrophic decay is, in reality, just a perfect harmonic adjustment across an infinite geometric lattice. The universe isn't breaking down, it is constantly, flawlessly rebalancing its own equations.
It presents a framework where every motion, every dimensional emergence, and every transfer of energy follows a precise, unyielding geometric law. It portrays reality as a completely unified, perfectly functioning mathematical organism.
Which leaves me with one final thought, something I really want you, the listener, to mull over as you go about the rest of your day. We've established that in the reality proposed by TDUFT, the universe is a perfect mathematical organism.
Right.
There are absolutely no flaws. There's no true decay. Every single action, no matter how chaotic it looked to us, is perfectly accounted for in a flawlessly balanced geometric equation.
That is the core claim, yes.
If that is true, if every movement of a particle, every unfolding dimension, and every perceived loss or tragedy is just a precise, inescapable harmonic adjustment, then where exactly does human free will fit into this infinite multidimensional lattice?
That is the big question.
If the entire universe is a mathematically flawless structure, scaling perfectly from the smallest one-dimensional seed all the way up to the cosmic boundary of light, are the choices we make just illusions? The things you agonize over, the career decisions, the relationships, the moral dilemmas, are they actually choices? Or are we and our consciousness simply complex geometric variables executing a flawless, infinite, pre-calculated attenuation?
It really reframes everything.
Are you the author of your own life, or are you just the universe balancing its own beautiful, infinite equation?
It is a profoundly unsettling philosophical question raised directly by the physics. If the geometry of reality is truly perfect and closed, perhaps our internal feeling of choice is simply what it feels like, consciously, to be a variable in an equation that is actively balancing itself.
Something to keep you staring at the ceiling tonight. Thank you so much for joining us on this incredibly dense, deeply fascinating deep dive. Keep questioning the nature of your reality. Keep looking for the geometry hidden in the world around you. And we will catch you next time.